Welcome to a special edition of 74 in 74, where we'll be discussing Paul Verhoeven's latest film, Benedetta. There's a lot to unpack about this film, so I've got a panel of experts, movie buffs, film geeks, who are going to share their thoughts about the film and give their perspective on what we're going to see on screen.
Benedetta! Viens à moi!
J'arrive, Seigneur, j'arrive.
Il nous est arrivé une chose merveilleuse. Jésus-Christ a choisi notre bienheureuse sœur, Benedetta.
So we're joined here by two of our young audience panelists. We've got Jin Lee and Simeon Costello. Jin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm, as Claire said, a young audience panelist at the Phoenix. I'm also in my final year studying psychology at the University of Exeter. And sort of extracurricularly, I quite enjoy trying to dig my teeth in sort of the film's general sphere as much as I can. Fantastic.
Simeon.
Hi, I'm Simeon. I'm on the young audience panel with Jin, and I'm a filmmaker and producer in Exeter.
Brilliant, thank you. And we've also got Amber Goodwin-Figers, who's part of the Exeter Phoenix team. She's also a sex-positive mental health advocate who's one of the collaborators of Bloom Festival. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that, Amber?
Yeah, so Bloom Mental Wellness Festival is on 8th of May this year. It's essentially a one-day festival for everyone to come together, a kind of platform discussion about mental health and identity, and how the arts can be a form of expression and healing through various kind of traumatic events. And I was really excited to be a part of kind of discussing this film because, as I'm sure we'll go on to talk about, there's a lot of interesting things to say about what's perceived as wellness and identity, and kind of reclaiming that, and that's a lot of the things that we're trying to do with Bloom as well.
Thank you. And Bloom takes place at Exeter Phoenix.
Yeah, at Exeter Phoenix, Sunday 8th of May, full building takeover from about 10 a.m. through to 9 p.m. So give it a Google if you like, and yeah, see what's going on.
There's some films going on as well. That's what I know.
Absolutely.
Okay, so on to Benedetta. So this film was created by the same director who brought RoboCop, Showgirls, Basic Instinct, Total Recall. So it's fair to say that he's got a slight over-the-top style. It's quite experiential, and it's certainly carried through into this film. So it's a rich cinematic experience. I think it's fair to say it's erotic, it's ridiculous all at once. So do you think, as you guys, do you think it's fair to say that this is a film of contrasts, and is it possible to kind of delight and disapprove of a film at the same time?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of contrasts in, like, the film is primarily set in this nunnery that's quite, beautiful old building, and then there's some very apocalyptic things that happen, and there's scenes of violence and sex, and it's quite a lot of different contrasting pieces in the film.
Yeah, there's as you say, Simeon, there's the whole film is contrast, really. There's this definite kind of clash between, or this conversation around truth in terms of religious truth, what's acceptable, what's very much not acceptable, what's kind of those perceived spaces of reality, and kind of the lines of acceptability. There's a quote which, without giving anything away, seems to be quite useful kind of in exploring the film as a whole. When she enters the convent as a young girl, she has this beautiful dress taken away from her and given this, I'm not sure what you'd call it, kind of this really rough robe, and she's told, your body is your worst enemy, best not to feel at home in it. And watching the film, it's such a huge contrast between self and social expectation or religious expectation, pain, pleasure, sex, violence, like you say, Simeon. There's so much going on. Some of it is glorious, some of it kind of sits a little bit uncomfortable, but that's what good film does. I think it's really interesting for that. Yeah.
I mean, for me in particular, I think the biggest contrast was actually with like sort of between what I expected this film to look like and what it actually ended up being. I was really surprised to find that it was just very funny in a lot of places, especially where, as you were saying earlier, Claire, the girl has a lot of sort of visions, and the visions, I think, are sort of extremely and necessarily deliberately over the top. And the violence in them is just very sort of almost cartoony. And I thought from that perspective, it was just sort of, it surprised me with how funny it was actually.
Yeah, I was the same. I didn't expect it to be quite so comical, and I think at times I wasn't sure if we were supposed to be laughing along with it or not. And I think there's some, like, as you touched upon, Amber, there's quite a few kind of heavy topics in there. We see, death by suicide. There's the kind of underlying themes of men's control over women, love and relationships. So do you think is it a serious film? Can we take it seriously?
I think there's definitely elements to it, and there's a lot of seriousness in it with this kind of sort of humorous elements to it. But I think it should be taken seriously, and laugh at the bits that are funny as well.
The bits that feel really poignant, those areas where you're not sure whether you're, as you say, Claire, laughing along with or meant to take them seriously. It feels almost tongue-in-cheek with Benedetta, in that she is playing with this idea of who has power, and we question who she is through the film. We question these visions, and it feels like there's this playfulness around authority, around tradition, around the church, which perhaps these kind of almost kind of camp violent visions that we see, they're so extravagant, they're so over the top. It feels like that playfulness is kind of questioning where the power lies in the play, and that I think is in the film, and that I think is the seriousness of it. Saying who's really got autonomy in this position.
Yeah, I think if we look at Charlotte Rampling's character as the Mother Superior, I think she just plays it consistently. She's consistently serious, and she's almost like she adds that moral framework, I think, throughout the film, and we see her, incredible performance. Like, she's outstanding in the film and puts everything into it, and I think that helps you navigate the film in that sense, in terms of its serious elements and it's more over the top. She's kind of acts like that throughout. So there's no denying that this film has a very male gaze, and I think the nature of the directors and the film that he's made before, and it's a very male gaze of in the view of nuns and also lesbianism. How did that land for you guys?
It was, at first it was conflicting, a little disappointing perhaps, to see that a male gaze representation of lesbianism. We see an awful lot of it, but it was interesting in that it seems that there's a lot of symbolism, a lot of tokenism within the film about the church and about identity. And when you are coming out of these religious visions that she has, and then feeling so emblematic, to then have these scenes that don't feel particularly authentic necessarily to a female gaze, but it all, there's so many elements within the characters and their relationships with performance, who they're performing for, what's true, what's not. So to look at it in that context, I think is quite interesting, particularly when we know that, not everything is as secret as they may think it is in that relationship. So yeah, I think through that frame, it did add a different element to it.
I think sorry. Go on, Jin.
Oh, okay. I think I read somewhere that Verhoeven was saying that he wasn't trying to portray a story of women that he didn't really understand. I think he was, from an interview I saw him do, I think he was saying that he wanted to do a film that was quite faithful to the facts of what happened. And obviously, I've not really perused the source material that well, but and that's also up to the people watching to make their minds up on independently. But I don't feel like it was trying to make any statements about sort of anything beyond what he sees and what he sees in the text as opposed to anything else. So for me, I didn't sort of see it as very problematic, although I'm sure if I was a different person, I may think very differently.
I felt that there's bits in it where the two main characters talking about their love for each other, and it didn't feel for me that what they were saying translated to their actions and the way that they were sort of portrayed. Like there's a conversation quite later on in the film of how they're talking about, did they act out of lust or love, and they're speaking about their acting out of love for one another, but kind of everything that we've seen up until that point I felt didn't portray their love for one another, which I'm sure they had, but it did feel like it was a lot more about the sex between the two of them and their physical relationship as opposed to their emotional relationship.
I mean, in the note we've talked about what goes on behind the scenes and what we don't see, and I think that lends itself to the nature of nuns on film. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about what cinema's kind of interest is with nuns on film, because there's so many films about nuns, nunploitation films. So what do you think that makes films so nuns so film worthy?
They're sort of like, and I'm going to compare this to a short film that will have played at the Phoenix called Hell's Bells, which is about a cult of Morris dancers. It's like, it's similarly with nuns. They're like kind of groups that aren't really seen out of very specific contexts. So to see this kind of behind the closed doors of a nunnery that you wouldn't, normally see unless you were part of that nunnery or part of the religious environment or whatever, to see that on film is really interesting, I think, as an audience, especially if it's done genuinely, to kind of see this behind the scenes look at it. And I compare that to Hell's Bells, the short film that Luke made, because it's like, you see, you know of Morris dancers, and you kind of know what they do at village fetes. We don't see them behind closed doors, so like it's quite similar with the nuns in this film.
Yeah. Okay. I like that, what they get up to and people can't see.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's the element of the untold story, as you say, it's what you can't see, and I guess also maybe this notion of choosing to give up your identity for another identity, choosing to put one of your life before that to one side and become somebody else, and I guess maybe the psyche behind that, or what that means to live like that, when we don't necessarily encounter that in many other aspects.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I think leading on from what Amber just said, I think it's like anyone who's got that much dedication willfully, I think that's key as well, for a certain thing is always going to be like an attractive subject on screen, and this is just one facet in which that is sort of by definition needs to be the case for one to become a nun, and therefore very interesting.
Yeah, and also the idea that a nun comes kind of in a uniform and we can make assumptions already about what that character is, and I think that comes with kind of constriction, and in cinema then it's quite easy to conflict with that quite quickly and have that contrast of a nun doing something that they shouldn't. It suddenly seems so much more contrasting than if you have a character that isn't perhaps uniformed in that way.
Sancta Benedetta.
Vous avez un doute?
La fille était au lit. Aucun miracle ne se produit dans un lit.
I'd like you maybe to describe Benedetta in 3 words. Could we do that, Amber?
Come back to me.
Simeon, you're good on the spot.
Let's go with sexy, funny, and conflicting.
2 words.
It's fine.
Loud, confronting, passionate.
I've got surprisingly funny and transgressive.
So Benedetta opens on Friday. Screening times can be seen online. It's an 18 certificate, and come and check it out. It's been highly talked about, and you need to see it for yourselves. Thank you very much. Goodbye.